My friends, let us consider for a moment the image of a pillar standing alone in the vast halls of some ancient ruin. It is elegant, intricately carved, and still upright after centuries, yet we forget that it was never meant to stand alone. Once, it shared the weight of a glorious roof with others, but now, bereft of its companions, it carries a burden it was never designed to bear on its own, and so it creaks and groans under the strain. This is the unsupported woman. She too was not fashioned to stand solitary, unaided and unnoticed. Her strength is undeniable, indeed, no one disputes it. But strength does not mean she does not tire. Her resilience does not mean she does not ache. The world often marvels at her ability to bear up under the load, yet too often it withholds the very support she needs. In some quarters, she is dismissed as too much, too loud, too independent, too insistent on her rightful place. Elsewhere, she is told she is not enough, not gentle enough, not self-sacrificing enough, not invisible enough. And so, she is left standing in the storm, both admired and ignored, both praised and abandoned. This is no idle matter, no abstraction. When we fail to support the unsupported, we condemn them to a struggle that will, in time, weigh down the very fabric of our homes, our societies, and even our souls. For no pillar, however strong, was made to carry the roof alone. But what does it mean to support? It does not mean pity, for pity, when left alone, is but a passive sentiment. Nor does it mean a grudging nod of acknowledgement. True support is an act of humility and solidarity. It is the willingness to kneel beside her under the burden, to offer hands and hearts in service, and to recognize her as not merely a pillar, but a person. And if she has already fallen, then it means we do not turn away, muttering about inevitable collapse or natural consequences. It means we bend down, we labor to lift her, and we do so not as a favor, but as a duty owed. For her fall is not merely her loss, it is ours. It is the crumbling of something beautiful, something vital, something irreplaceable. My friends, the unsupported woman is not a problem to be solved, but a treasure to be cherished. Let us not be like the crowd that stands at a distance, marveling at her endurance but offering no relief. Let us instead be the builders, the companions, the steadfast allies who say, "You will not stand alone, not anymore." For in lifting her we do not merely uphold one life, we uphold our humanity. And that, my friends, is the truest and most sacred work of all. Imagine an ancient pillar, intricately carved and standing alone in a vast, crumbling hall. It carries the weight of what remains of the structure, a roof sagging with years of neglect. The pillar is steadfast, an enduring testament to craftsmanship and strength, yet it was never intended to bear the entire load alone. It was once one of many, part of a system designed to share the burden. Now, isolated, it creaks under the strain, its beauty obscured by the weight it carries. Such is the reality of the unsupported woman. She is strong, capable and resilient, but she was never meant to face life's challenges in solitude. Strength does not mean invulnerability, and endurance does not imply the absence of struggle. Society often marvels at her ability to persevere, mistaking her capacity for an invitation to pile on more. Her quiet determination is celebrated in words, but rarely matched with action to ease her burden. She stands tall because she must, but the toll is exacting, the cracks invisible until it is too late. From time immemorial, women have been the invisible scaffolding of families, communities, and societies. They have nurtured, supported, and sustained, often without acknowledgement or adequate help. Yet when circumstances isolate them, be it through societal expectations, systemic inequities, or personal struggles, their role shifts from one of collaboration to solitary endurance. The unsupported woman becomes both the architect and the laborer, the protector and the provider, the comforter and the comforted. She is the lone pillar in a crumbling hall, holding up not only her own life, but often those of others who depend on her. This isolation is not of her choosing. It is the result of a world that has historically undervalued her contributions while simultaneously overburdening her. She is expected to be strong, and so she is, but her strength becomes a convenient excuse for others to step back, to let her manage on her own, as though her independence absolves them of their responsibility. Her strength, ironically, becomes her isolation. Yet the unsupported woman is not merely a victim of neglect, she is also a testament to resilience. Like the lone pillar, she endures because she understands the value of what she supports. Her determination stems from love, duty, and the hope of a better future. But resilience, however admirable, is not infinite. Without reinforcement, even the strongest structure will eventually give way. When that happens, the collapse is not hers alone but reverberates throughout the entire structure of which she is a part. To see her as a pillar is to recognize both her strength and her need. She is not an unyielding monolith but a living being, deserving of care, companionship, and relief. Her burden is not hers to bear alone. It is a shared responsibility. Supporting her does not diminish her strength. It honors it, and in doing so we ensure not just her survival but the flourishing of all she holds up, making the entire structure stronger and more enduring. Society has long misunderstood the role and needs of women, often placing them under contradictory expectations that leave them unsupported and undervalued. This misjudgment arises from a flawed perception that swings between two extremes, praising their strength while dismissing their struggles, or criticizing their perceived shortcomings while ignoring the systemic barriers they face. This dual narrative creates a paradox, trapping women. On one side, women are celebrated for their resilience. Their ability to juggle multiple responsibilities, whether as caregivers, professionals, or community builders, is lauded. They are held up as paragons of endurance and adaptability, admired for their capacity to do it all. However, this admiration often becomes a double-edged sword. The very acknowledgement of their strength can lead to an assumption that they neither need nor deserve help. Society, enamored with the image of the strong woman, often fails to see that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to persevere through it. This oversight ignores the toll that constant endurance takes, physically, emotionally, and mentally. Instead of offering support, society often leaves these women to carry their burdens alone, as though their resilience absolves others of responsibility. On the other side, women are frequently criticized for being too much or not enough. If they are outspoken and assertive, they may be labeled as overbearing or unfeminine. If they are reserved or cautious, they might be dismissed as lacking ambition or independence. These judgments often arise from deeply ingrained stereotypes that define what a woman should be. These expectations are not only outdated but also deeply limiting, reducing women to narrow roles that fail to account for their individuality or the complexity of their experiences. The unsupported woman, caught in this web of conflicting demands, is left in an impossible position to prove her worth while constantly being told she is falling short. This misjudgment is further compounded by systemic inequities that disproportionately affect women. Whether it is the wage gap, unequal access to opportunities, or the expectation to shoulder the majority of unpaid caregiving work, the unsupported woman operates in a world that often undervalues her contributions while overburdening her. Yet these challenges are frequently dismissed as personal failings, rather than symptoms of broader societal issues. The result is a narrative that blames women for their struggles while failing to address the structural barriers that create them. The true tragedy of society's misjudgment is that it overlooks the richness and potential of women's contributions. By focusing on stereotypes and flawed expectations, society robs itself of the opportunity to fully benefit from their talents, insights, and leadership. To support women, society must first recognize its role in perpetuating these contradictions. It must move beyond shallow admiration and harsh criticism to offer meaningful support and equitable opportunities. Only then can the unsupported woman be truly seen for who she is, not as a symbol of endurance, but as an individual deserving of dignity, respect, and care. Admiration without action is a phenomenon that has long characterized the way society interacts with the idea of the strong, resilient woman. We often hear her praised, her qualities lauded in speeches, articles, and conversations, yet so frequently this admiration is superficial, offered with words, but without the accompanying commitment to meaningful change or tangible support. In essence, society admires her, but then steps back, leaving her to shoulder her burdens alone. The unsupported woman often receives a great deal of praise for her ability to endure, to rise above adversity, and to meet challenges with grace and perseverance. Her strength becomes a point of admiration, a quality that people remark upon in awe. "She's amazing," they say. "Look at everything she's managing." But the admiration is more often than not hollow. It doesn't translate into action. Instead of offering to help, people stand back, admiring her from a distance, as though her endurance is enough in itself to make up for the absence of support. This creates a dangerous dynamic where she is expected to be a symbol of strength and self-sufficiency, leaving little room for vulnerability or the acknowledgement that even the strongest among us need assistance. Admiration without action is a form of passive acknowledgement, a recognition that doesn't lead to change. It's easy to speak about the strength of women, to commend their ability to keep going when things are tough, but much more difficult to offer the help that would relieve their burden. This situation is compounded by the idea that women, particularly those who display resilience, are somehow beyond needing help. Their capability becomes a reason not to intervene, rather than a reason to offer assistance. The admiration thus becomes a form of distancing, as though, by simply recognizing her strength, others are absolved of their responsibility to support her. This admiration without action can also be seen in how society often praises women for their roles as caregivers, community leaders, and multitakers, without addressing the systems that demand so much from them. We talk about the superwoman who balances work, family, and personal life as though this balance were attainable without extraordinary sacrifice. We cheer the woman who handles all things with grace, but we rarely question why the weight is so disproportionately placed upon her in the first place. Instead of asking how we can lighten her load, we admire her for carrying it. This kind of admiration does little to challenge the structural inequalities that place an unfair burden on women. It becomes a way of perpetuating the status quo, where women's labor is invisible yet deeply valued in a way that ultimately benefits others while neglecting her well-being. To move beyond admiration without action, we must transform praise into tangible support. This means looking beyond the surface and engaging with the deeper issues at hand. It requires understanding that the admired woman is not a superhuman, but a human who, like all others, has limits and needs. We must create a society that not only celebrates women's strength, but actively participates in alleviating the burdens they carry. This involves not just offering words of admiration, but also contributing resources, time, and effort to make her life more equitable and less exhausting. True admiration demands action. It calls us to move from acknowledgement to real, meaningful change. Admiration without action ultimately diminishes both the woman and the society that offers it. Only by moving past this passive form of respect can we truly honor the strength of the unsupported woman, not as an object of admiration, but as a person deserving of the full support and solidarity of her community. When we fail to support the woman who stands alone, we don't merely neglect one individual, we contribute to a wider, collective harm that reverberates through society as a whole. The unsupported woman, while undoubtedly carrying an immense burden, is also a reflection of a larger issue, one that speaks to the health of our communities, families, and cultures. Her struggles are not isolated, but are part of a systemic imbalance that affects everyone, regardless of gender, and the consequences of this neglect are far-reaching. At its core, the failure to support the unsupported woman is a denial of the interconnectedness that binds us all. She is often the pillar upon which families, neighborhoods, and even entire institutions rest. When she falters, the effects ripple outward, touching everyone in her orbit. The emotional and physical strain she endures doesn't just harm her, it reverberates to those who depend on her. Children suffer when their mothers are overwhelmed. Partners feel the strain when the burden of responsibility falls disproportionately on one individual. Workplaces suffer when employees are expected to carry the weight of multiple roles without adequate support. The lack of acknowledgement for her needs leads to a cascade of consequences that undermine the very fabric of the communities we build. This collective harm is also reflected in the way systemic inequalities are perpetuated. When society fails to offer adequate support to women, it reinforces the structures that keep them in positions of disadvantage. The unequal distribution of domestic labor, the gender wage gap, and the lack of accessible childcare are all symptoms of a larger failure to value women's contributions beyond what is immediately visible. The unsupported woman becomes a casualty of these systemic forces, and when she is left to bear the weight of these challenges alone, society as a whole suffers. The collective harm is not just a byproduct of neglect. It is a direct result of a system that perpetuates inequality and fails to recognize the importance of shared responsibility. Moreover, the collective harm extends to the very concept of solidarity. When we fail to support the woman who is struggling, we diminish the strength of our social bonds. Society becomes fragmented, each person isolated in their struggles, with no collective effort to relieve one another's burdens. The idea of mutual aid is lost, and we become spectators rather than participants in one another's lives. This erosion of solidarity weakens communities, making them more vulnerable to breakdown. When we fail to act in support of those who need it, we reinforce a culture of individualism where everyone is left to fend for themselves. The unsupported woman, rather than being embraced and lifted by her community, is left to fight her battles in isolation, which leads to fragmentation and, ultimately, to a weaker society overall. Perhaps the most profound collective harm of all is the message it sends to future generations. When we fail to support women today, we teach young people that their needs and struggles are less important, that their burdens are theirs to bear alone. We set a precedent that perpetuates cycles of neglect, where women continue to shoulder disproportionate loads without the acknowledgement or assistance they deserve. We deny them the chance to thrive, and in doing so, we limit the potential of our society as a whole. To break free from this cycle, we must recognize that the unsupported woman is not just a solitary figure, but a symbol of a larger societal failure. Her well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of everyone around her. When she is lifted up, we all rise. Supporting her is not just an act of kindness, it is an investment in the strength, health, and vitality of the community as a whole. Only by addressing the collective harm caused by neglect can we build a more equitable and compassionate society. True support is not a passive gesture or a fleeting sentiment. It is an active, intentional commitment to alleviating the burdens of another. Support is not simply about saying the right words or offering superficial gestures. It requires action, engagement, and a willingness to share in the responsibility of lifting someone up. When we speak of supporting the unsupported woman, we must move beyond the realm of admiration or abstract empathy and enter into the realm of tangible, meaningful action. This is the only way to create real change in the lives of those who are struggling. To support someone truly is to recognize their needs and respond with purpose. It means stepping in when a person's strength is not enough to bear the weight of their circumstances, whether those burdens are emotional, financial, or physical. For the unsupported woman, this may look like offering practical help, taking on some of her responsibilities, helping to lighten her load, or providing resources that enable her to continue without exhaustion. It may involve offering a listening ear when she needs to express her struggles, or providing a space where she can take a breath and recharge. True support is about doing the things that allow her to focus on what matters most, without the constant, overwhelming pressure of carrying everything on her own. But support also requires more than just immediate relief. It involves long-term commitment to creating environments in which women do not have to carry these burdens in the first place. True support is rooted in empathy, but it is also rooted in action that addresses the structural factors contributing to inequality. This means challenging societal expectations, fighting against unequal pay, advocating for better access to childcare, and pushing for systems that allow women to thrive, not just survive. It means recognizing that support is not just about responding to individual needs, but also about addressing the root causes of why so many women find themselves unsupported in the first place. True support requires stepping outside the comfort zone of passive recognition. It calls for the willingness to stand beside someone in their moment of struggle, to be there when they need a hand to hold, a voice of encouragement, or the practical assistance to ease their load. This is not about charity, it is about solidarity. Support is not something that can be given from a place of superiority or detachment. It must come from a place of understanding that we are all in this together. When we support someone, we make a conscious decision to be in the struggle with them, to share the weight and work together toward a solution. It is a shared responsibility, not a favor or a simple act of kindness. Action also means being willing to examine our own behaviors and biases. How often do we, as individuals or as a society, overlook the needs of others because we assume they will manage or that they are capable of handling it on their own? True support requires us to examine these assumptions and, if necessary, to dismantle them. It means recognizing that strength does not preclude vulnerability, that independence does not mean a lack of need. The unsupported woman, like all people, needs more than just admiration. She needs help, she needs understanding, and she needs solidarity. True support is not always easy, nor is it always convenient. It may ask us to make sacrifices, to rearrange our priorities, or to extend ourselves in ways that are uncomfortable. But it is also the most important form of care we can give. When we offer real support, we contribute not just to the well-being of the individual, but to the well-being of the community as a whole. In the end, true support transforms the relationships we have with others, and it creates a culture of shared responsibility where everyone can stand a little taller, a little stronger, and a little freer. Lifting humanity together is not just a lofty ideal. It is a necessary practice for the survival and flourishing of our communities. When we support each other, particularly those who are unsupported, we do more than just help an individual. We strengthen the very fabric of our society. The well-being of one person is intricately connected to the well-being of everyone around them, and when we actively lift up those who are struggling, we elevate the collective potential of humanity. This act of lifting is not simply a moral obligation, but an investment in a future that benefits us all. At the core of lifting humanity together is the recognition that we are all interconnected. The unsupported woman is not an isolated figure, but part of a greater whole. When she is burdened, exhausted, or neglected, the entire system suffers. Her health, her happiness, and her ability to contribute to society are diminished, and that loss ripples outwards. Families are affected, workplaces are impacted, and entire communities feel the strain. But when she is supported, when the weight of her responsibilities is shared and her needs are addressed, her potential is unlocked, and she can contribute to the world around her in ways that benefit everyone. The act of lifting her is an act of lifting humanity. This idea of lifting humanity together extends beyond the individual. It speaks to a collective responsibility that transcends boundaries and divisions. It means recognizing that no one is truly free or thriving when others are left behind. We cannot claim to live in a just, thriving society if we allow a portion of the population to bear burdens that are too great to carry alone. We cannot claim to be compassionate or fair if we turn a blind eye to the needs of those who are unsupported. Lifting humanity together requires us to look beyond our own lives and to consider the lives of those who are struggling, especially those who do not have the resources or systems in place to ease their burden. It requires us to extend ourselves, not out of pity, but out of an understanding that the well-being of each individual is a reflection of the strength and vitality of the whole. In lifting humanity together, we also create a culture of care and mutual responsibility. It's easy to view others' struggles as separate from our own, to believe that the pain of one person does not affect us. But the truth is that the challenges faced by others reverberate throughout society. When we fail to address the needs of the unsupported woman, we risk creating a society where everyone is isolated in their struggles, each person bearing their burdens without the support they need. This fragmentation leads to a weakened, divided society, where empathy and cooperation are replaced by competition and self-interest. By lifting others, we foster a culture where people are seen, heard, and valued. We create a community where no one is left to stand alone, where strength is found not in isolation but in shared effort. Lifting humanity together also requires us to confront the systems that perpetuate inequality and suffering. It's not enough to simply offer help on a case-by-case basis. We must work to dismantle the structures that create the need for that help in the first place. Supporting the unsupported woman means challenging the systemic inequities that place undue burdens on her. It means pushing for equal opportunities, fair wages, access to healthcare, and supportive environments where everyone, regardless of gender or background, can thrive. It is a recognition that true progress is not just about individual success, but about the collective advancement of all people. Ultimately, lifting humanity together is an act of hope. It is a belief in the possibility of a better world, one in which no one is left behind. It requires a shift from individualism to solidarity, from self-interest to communal care. It asks us to see the humanity in others, to recognize that when we help one person, we are helping all of us. The act of lifting is not just about offering help. It is about creating a future where everyone can stand tall, where everyone can contribute to the collective good, and where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. In lifting humanity together, we create a world that is stronger, more compassionate, and more just.